Hello everybody, today I'm going to talk about approaching intercultural contact. As you can see, the sources included here, futurelearn.com and educators, Dr. Highness Collins. So let's get started. First off, I'm going to start off with the definition of what acculturation means. Acculturation means how people come to adopt the values and practices of another culture, and while doing that they get to experience something called culture shock, which you might be familiar with, which brings us to our other terms, which are U curve and W curve. These are actually meant to reflect the different emotional states that somebody goes through when they experience acculturation. As you can see here, the start of the U and W curves reflect a heightened sense of excitement and anticipation for the experience ahead, because these people are, they know that they're going to go to another culture and they're just going to try to fit in with another society, and of course this excites them. But this is unfortunately, and most of the time, followed by a drastic fall by the challenges encountered. They might be experiencing loneliness or even homesick, and after they start to adapt to the new culture, a feeling of achievement happens. So this is exactly the part where acculturation happens. Actually, this is what acculturation is. W curve, on the other hand, demonstrates the feelings felt upon returning home. First, people are of course excited to go home, but after they arrive home, it doesn't really feel the way they expected it to be. It becomes a reverse culture shock, because it doesn't really live up to the initial expectation. They adjust themselves to the new culture again, but these models are not really functional. They're a bit defective in that they assume everybody experiences acculturation in the same way, which of course couldn't be further from the truth. Here, this is a spiral model by Young Kim's theory. The spiral model represents the acculturation process better, because the model says the process of acculturation includes potentially stressful mechanisms like denial and hostility, facilitating intercultural competence. So this actually divides into four main parts. I'm going to talk about them in detail. The first one is knowledge, the second one is awareness, the third one is skills, and the last one attitude. So knowledge is, this is actually what we know about the country before we go to that country beforehand. These can be preconceptions or biases about the culture or the city, but most of the time, like really most of the time, these preconceptions change when we're there. Awareness. Awareness is observing nonverbal cues from the people around us, which might be quite hard in the beginning. These can actually tell us whether or not we're behaving right or conforming to the set of rules of that culture. But these cues, as I said, might be hard to pick up on. Skills. Skills is the ability to negotiate competing discourse and expectations. People might have some kind of bias towards you just based on your appearance, or just because they know that you came from another country. Attitude. Attitude is the desire to be open, curious, and have the desire for engaging with the new culture. It also involves not making, assumptions about that culture, or again, prejudices about that culture, or using polarizing words like us and them. A critical incident. So this is actually an incident that is being talked about in the MOOC. This is actually a very good lesson that we can take away. So I'm going to explain what exactly the incident is. So there is a girl named Maya, and she understands a Senegalese custom, thinking guests were avoiding stepping on an expensive rug, And she thought that only rich people could wear out expensive carpets, and she was biased about it. And trying to challenge what she saw as snobbery, she walked like right across it, only to learn later that it was actually a tablecloth for the meal. Realizing her mistake, she felt deep shame and embarrassment. And this is actually a very, very great lesson that we can learn. We shouldn't really be biased, or we shouldn't have preconceived notions about anywhere that we might go. And this is the comment that I made in the site about this whole incident. This is a great incident to teach us that we shouldn't have any prejudices about a culture or look down on it. At the end of the day, we might experience embarrassment that can teach us a great lesson, like what happened here. A useful framework for the critical incident. The first one is incident or observation. The second one is reaction. The third one is critical analysis. And the fourth one is further questions and reflections. So I'm going to talk about them in detail. Before I talk about them, what is this exactly? This is actually a framework, model framework, to help us analyze this particular incident that I talked about in the previous slide. So we actually analyze the incident better. So let's start off with incident or observation. The incident and observation section should objectively describe the critical incident without really offering interpretations or explanations. This incident might be a specific moment that caused confusion or discomfort, or an observation of unfamiliar or puzzling behavior or language. So in Maya's case, this is like we describe what happens, and this is I walk back and forth on the carpet. That part might be the incident observation. The reaction part. This is Angelia's incident made her feel a sense of shame, which heightened the impact of the critical incident. Again, rich points can often lead to a sense of confusion or curiosity, where you want to understand and explain actually what happened. And you just, again, like I said, you describe what happens, and how this ties in with that incident. It is, I was on fire with shame. That sentence might conclude it. Critical analysis. In the critical analysis section, our task is to break down the incident or observation and explore the reasons behind it, rather than relying on cultural differences or things like that. We actually explain why we think that particular thing happened. We shouldn't really rely on cultural stereotypes or simplistic cultural explanations. It's useful to look at the situation from various angles and consider the different intentions or perspectives of those involved. For Angelo, this part represents the self-examination that she carried out, actually. She reflected on why she assumed that a behavior or a custom she knew from one place would automatically apply in a completely different context. And, you know, how this ties in with what we just said. We can ask this question: why did I think the rock was for walking on? You know. Further questions and reflections. The further questions and reflections section allows you to revisit your own interpretations and examine whether you reached any conclusions too quickly or relied on assumptions. This part can also be used to broaden your thinking by raising wider questions or identifying areas for future research. In the Angelo's example, this would involve exploring questions such as, what shaped the assumptions she held about her host in Senegal. As you can see here, question your own conclusions, consider future research questions, and the question is, what assumptions did I make? Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.